process. I'd like to know how this process you're talking about now compares with the process that was used to select current superintendent. Because whatever that process was a gross, absolute failure.
Well, I wasn't on the school board 12 years ago, so it is
It's the same firm.
Pardon?
It's the same search firm.
Same search firm?
That's doing it this time as did it last time. It's the same exact firm that brought us the candidate as the finalist who had twice filed for personal bankruptcy. And only then, once that was revealed, did this particular search firm scurry around and bring us, you know, the current superintendent. So, you know, you said, Phil, that one of the rating factors was, you know, their prior experience in checking out credentials. Their prior experience doesn't sound so hot to me. Did they talk about the whole Alfredo Massey business?
Well, obviously, you know, and I don't want to really go into it. I will say that this particular search firm has done 800 superintendent searches. So the fact that there was an issue with Alfredo Massey, you know, I mean, we took that into consideration. Okay, but we take it into, you know, they are one of the largest search firms in the country. And the problem with Alfredo Massey is something that happened a dozen years ago. One of the things that we are committed to doing is to hiring a separate firm to do background checks.
Well, that's interesting. Thanks. So let's not jump on Phil. He wasn't here last time, and so.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
How is the search firm remunerated? Is it by this percentage of the salary that the new superintendent is going to get?
They get a fee of $35,000.
Okay.
And then there are certain expenses in terms of if you know, travel, that sort of thing. But it's a flat fee. It has nothing to do with the compensation, which is really different. You know, in higher education, a lot of search firms get paid based on the salary of the person that they place.
Which would tend to have them bring you the high-priced guys first.
Emily.
Yeah, if I could just put a little bit of context around this. Having witnessed the transition in DC public schools of late, and there were, after the primary, there was a lot of anxiety about whether we would have a transition happen immediately or whether we'd have an interim approved. Also, right now there's an open seat in Newark public schools. There's a number of districts searching for leaders right now. This is a massively challenging thing to do because there actually is not a bench of proven talent for this role. Average tenure is 18 months in a superintendency in America today. And there is truly no person who has achieved at a system level breakthrough results when it comes to changing conditions of the achievement gap. And so that leaves communities having to make really hard decisions because we're not talking about a CEO search here where you have, you know, the ability to really go to proven talent. You really have to bet on something. And so the question is, what are you going to bet on? And I will say we are seeing surprising results come from people that are unlikely candidates, people who don't have extensive backgrounds in multiple years of being superintendents, but do have breakthrough results as a school principal, where they have really gotten results, or even in the nonprofit sector. So if that's helpful context at all, there's no easy way to get this right.
Well, I would just add to that, I can't give you any advice on how to pick a perfect superintendent, because the point is ultimately you can't, as we've talked about. You can't even decide ultimately, it seems to me, or at least in the past, well, which group is big enough to have a seat at the table for who's going to be consulted by the search firm. How are they going to decide which group they are going to listen to the most when they decide, well, is this the group we're going to prioritize and try and get a superintendent who helps them, or we're going to try and get a superintendent who helps someone else? And it's absolutely true that there is no set formula that says we plug in characteristics X, Y, and Z, and then we get superintendent. odds are, you're rolling the dice no matter what you do. That's why this comes back to something that maybe people don't want to hear. But you have got to give people options outside of the single system schools, and that means you got to have charter schools. I would go beyond that. I'd say you need full school choice of any school. But you cannot force everybody to have a single system of schools, especially if for no other reason you don't know who's going to lead it or what you're going to get. And there's no way you can really predict that. And so you could saddle everybody with a terrible situation if you get a bad superintendent. You need to at least have escape valves so people can go do something else. And if you don't do that, you're all going to be on the same very sketchy boat.
I want to go back to the selection of forums and recommend that one of those forums include, and maybe it's already foreseen, the student government representatives. I think we have an incredibly talented group of students who should have some say and who can speak for what's been positive about their experience to date, but should have some input into how this selection is made.
Ma'am, you were waiting.
And what I'm just going to say, by the way, my other role in coming tonight was to listen to what you all are saying, because this is really, what you're getting is a board member who is now getting the first level of input from the community. So that's what I've been doing, is taking notes as you all have been making comments, and I will feed that back to the other board members. So this is, you've got a head start in terms of what our process is going to be.
Yeah, ma'am.
Well, I just want to talk. I'm a longtime educator, and I've worked in many systems and sort of retired now. But I like to say that all this about, gee, we can just go and get a CEO and anybody can do this kind of job, it does not work that way. You need someone who understands education, that's worked in education, can get along with teachers, can get along with the community, has the skills. I mean, when we think about what's going on in New York City, Bloomberg put a socialite who sends her kids to a boarding school, head of the New York schools. In Chicago, we've had a policeman put in charge of schools, and he's been equipped, and they're looking for someone else. Hopefully we'll go back to someone who has experience in education. And we're seeing this everywhere. And the charter schools, only 1 in 5 charter schools does as well as the public schools. So I don't think we need to go down that route. I think we have a good system here, and I want to agree also with Linda about the special ed. We need a continuum of services, but we need an experienced educator who knows this community, gets along with all facets of the community, and believes in inclusion of the community. Not necessarily special ed.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a show of hands. How many people in this room are from the red zone? Wow, I'm impressed. I really am. Because my school, Twinburg Elementary, is from the red zone, and Mr. Kaufman heard me speak a couple of weeks ago at the Board of Ed. When the county talks about having all of this wonder technology and Promethean boards, our school has never seen any of that. I have a school with 88% minority. That's not our neighborhood's statistics from the census. That's what the composition is in the school. Everybody gets farms, and when there's this talk about having special education and charter schools and stuff like that, my question is, how about we go back to just saying that every school is at some certain benchmark standard? Because we're not even at the standard that there is this perception in Montgomery County that every school has all this stuff. We don't have any of it. We didn't even have ADA accessible bathrooms until a couple of years ago.
Jerry?
One of the things that you might want to consider of the superintendent is get a superintendent just as an educational officer, and consider having a chief financial officer sort of independent of the education person. Because one of our major problems is the financial situation in this county. And most other corporations have a CEO, but they also have a chief financial officer. And that would be the person looking after the financial part of the school, asking the question, can we raise the amount of, in the green area schools, can we raise the parking fees, can we pay to get some recovery of money, and sort of looking financial end separately as part of the business of educating people.
Did anyone want to respond to the issue about the red zone schools or the?
I'll answer it.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll answer it as, from a little bit of history. As many of you know, I'm a past president of the Montgomery County Civic Federation and did a lot in the zoning area for many years, okay? I won an award back in the 80s for identifying that there was a need to actually look at the school facilities, part of the zoning process, okay? But in terms of 12 years ago, a lot of the people here tonight that are active members of the Civic Fed don't know that the president of the Civic Fed led the effort to get Frida Massey bounced out, okay, and looking for a new candidate, okay? And as that, and part of that role, we then worked with Jerry Wiest when he came on board. You talk about the red and the green zone, okay? I have 4 kids that came through the Montgomery County school system, graduated from the 80s, early 80s through the 90s. One of the things that I pointed out to Jerry Wiest so that he could understand what was going on is I took data that was available from park and planning to show how zoning decisions over the years set up areas of the county where you had groupings of kids with special needs. Turns out I live in the Layhill area. Layhill, well, I'll say where Belpre crosses Georgia Avenue. Okay, using data, a study that I did for him, okay, when he came on board, I was able to show that whereas in the county as a whole, 9.5% of the households were single-parent households. In this area, because of county land use policies, 48.5%, if I've got it right, were single-parent households, okay? That's need in a big, big way. The big issue then was how to get more parents to come to parenting sessions at the school. This is Judy Docker's predecessor, okay, went through the hell of this whole thing, a school board member. Well, you can't get them to come to parenting sessions because they have no time. They're working days. They gotta come home, cook, wash, do clothes. What I'm really identifying is the issues that impact our schools go much deeper than the way that most people look at schools. And Jerry Wiest ended up having his own group of people try to analyze the problems of the school system. And what was amazing to him is that the data that I showed him using demographic data from park and planning ended up identifying exactly the same needy areas across, as his internal studies did. But the bottom is, people in the green areas, they want the same dollars for their schools as the people in the red schools. How do you spread the money? Okay? If you have really deep, deep problems in schools in the red area, for instance, where I live, okay? You're trying to improve teacher-student ratios. In the other areas, you don't need to improve those ratios. Are you familiar with the STARS research that was done down in Tennessee, starting about 20 years ago? I mean, identified some ways to fulfill gaps. Well, I mean, I look at Jerry Wiest as somebody who tried one hell of a lot of things. I haven't tracked it in the last 5 years. But I think he did a hell of a job trying to fulfill the needs of students as he faced the problems of the individual areas around the county. So if it's a green area, they want Promethean boards, okay? You go to the red areas, hey, they're looking for student-teacher ratios. And I was successful in that area of the Kennedy cluster to get adjustments very early on in student teacher ratios. We have a mixed bag. I don't know if it's charters, okay, that can answer, but I do think that we need, there's times when I almost think that we need a paid school board with people, because right now, I mean, if there is something that happens, Jerry Weiss can whip the school board around to any issue that he, you know, way he wants to go. Because he's a sharp, damn sharp guy. He could have been president, CEO with any Fortune 500 company. He knows how to play the game.
Thanks.
But I know I'm taking the floor, but
Right.
the issues go deep. And as long as you're looking at things superficially, and that's the way we were just trying to figure out, do we, you know, do we give more to special ed, or do we give more over here? Issues go so much deeper than that.
Yeah, ma'am? Okay.
Yeah, first of all, people on the inside have told me that when it came to school construction, school renovation, Jerry Weiss was the only person at the table. There was absolutely no oversight from the board or from the PTAs, and his demands were considered excessive, and yet no one was there to essentially stop him. So a lot of money was spent on questionable facades, walls, a lot of excesses that did not have anything to do with education. Secondly, in the ERIC database, which is the Education Research Database, they have evidence that when you put low SES kids in a gifted and talented environment, the performance is about the same. But Montgomery County has never wanted to spend that money. And there are profound disparities in per pupil expenditures between magnet programs such as Blair. And I would also question going in the direction of just an education background, so to speak, for a superintendent, because we do have some wonderful examples of out-of-the-box successes by innovative teachers and innovative principals, and some nonprofit programs as well. So it really should be a broader search. And I would just add that there are wonderful examples. We have outstanding private schools in this county, and we should look at some of what they are doing in terms of how they hire teachers. They hire scientists to teach science, who may not have an education degree, but have a scientific background and have demonstrated the ability to work with kids and communicate the subject matter. So I think there should be a broader approach.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to add one thing to what you said is about whether or not you want someone with an education background or not. I'm not an advocate on either side of that. All I can tell you is there really isn't any good research one way or another to say that somebody without an education background does better or worse. I think it's largely in the last 15 years or so that you've seen a move to bring in non-educators in these positions. The only thing I can do to inform this discussion is say, empirically, we don't have any meaningful evidence one way or the other.
I guess I would just want to interject and add too, though. It seems like there's the model of the superintendent as the CEO that's financially astute and so forth, but it seems like in the universities in the United States, the model is really somebody who's an educator and a scholar who comes up through the education ranks. I mean, they have a degree, they taught the subject, and they move up to dean, and they become president, and these universities are some of the greatest ones in the world. So personally, it seems like somebody who really thinks of scholarship, and then having what you were saying about it as a CFO separately should be possible.
Well, I don't know your name, sir, but what the man, a few rows back, said is something that some districts, I don't know how many are trying, where they have sort of somebody's in charge of the academic piece and somebody's in charge of the administrative and financial piece. I think, again, that's pretty new, and I haven't seen evidence one way or another how that works. I would be a little cautious about using universities because often once you get to the position of president, the presidents don't, it turns out, make a whole lot of decisions. They are spending most of their time doing fundraising. So it's hard to say that that is equivalent to a superintendent.
And Emily, did you?
Most of the districts that are trying that financial versus academic model are doing it more so from reconfiguring their internal staff. I think it's very rare to see any duality in leadership, particularly in an age of accountability that we are in right now, and see successful results. It usually has to boil down to one person.
Did you want to?
Well, I just wanted to agree essentially. It will surprise some people to hear me say that I think Jerry Wiest is the model. I think we should replicate him. I think we should do a little work on the board though, because we do need somebody else at the table, and we need a representative of the political community. We need a political entity to balance the needs of the community and to keep the superintendent straight. This superintendent, as the book Leading for Equity said, has blurred the lines between the teachers, the PTA, the unions, the board, and himself, so that he now controls the whole shebang. He's the one who makes the decision, and the board is supine. They let him do this. I hope that we'll hire a strong CEO who can manage the politics, who can deal with the unions, who has a strong vision for the demographics, who wants to raise the bar also. And I hope that the board will fulfill its political role in the best sense of the word.
I wanted to segue over too, because I wanted to get a chance to talk about finances and financial oversight and kind of move, although we're moving into that a little bit. I know a lot of us have been really frustrated in the lack of sunshine and transparency that we've seen given what the budget is, and especially as we move into these really restricted budgets that we're going to have. And I wondered if some of you could comment about that.
Well, there's a colleague of mine has just done a study of a number of school district budgets. Montgomery County wasn't among them, but what he found across the board, and they were generally large-sized districts like Montgomery County, was that most school districts, even within the district, don't know where the money is. So one side of the district doesn't know what the other district side is spending, and you could ask 4 different people in charge of finances or in some way in charge, and you get 4 different answers. So I'm afraid that there's a very real limit to the transparency you'll be able to get, not because people are necessarily trying to hide what's going on, but big bureaucracies have almost no ability to track things efficiently. This goes back, though, to something that I think is important. Often the way you hold, if you go outside of education, the way you generally hold a provider of something accountable is, if you don't like the product, you leave. You don't say, show me all your books. And if you're a big organization, you don't say to IBM, I'm not happy with my computer. Why don't you show me all your books so I can figure out what happened? You leave. Again, this is why you've got to have school choice. Because the fact of the matter is, you're talking about a very huge problem when we say, well, to balance out the superintendent, we need a strong school board. How do you get that strong school board? How do you strike a balance? How do you get through the politics of every person in every group legitimately wanting what's best for their kids or the kids they're advocating for? It gets extremely messy to do these things, and often you end up in paralysis and a lot of unhappiness. And as far as the research on charter school success, the point is not to say that charter schools will always produce the best test scores, because I think many people will agree that test scores are only one measure of what education is, what people want. And if you look at the track record of the MSAs, that is a moving target that nobody really knows what it is. So to use these tests is often a fool's errand, because nobody knows what's on the test or what it means. The part of choices are for people to be able to advocate for their kids by taking them out of a system they don't like, and probably even more important, for people to create schools that specialize in certain areas, and people whose kids fall under these areas, and all kids are different, can they'll find those providers. And charter schools have been shown, where there's enough of them, to lead to competition that leads to all schools improving. So I think you have got to look in the long term at having more choice, because you're not going to be able to get this sort of transparency from a huge system, even if you want it.
Good charter schools always change the conversation, and it's really, I know it's a scary notion in some ways at first, but charters are really nothing to be afraid of, and in every leading district that is making strong results, there's a healthy charter competition.
Yes, on this topic entirely, my understanding is that the superintendent doesn't have the authority to approve charter schools, that that's strictly with the Board of Ed. Am I wrong?
That's correct.
So no matter who we choose, that's not going to be a factor in what he or she can do.
He makes a recommendation, which the board
So
then
if it's
rubber
someone,
stamps.
if we choose someone who's a strong believer in charter schools, they may be able to sway the board to allow a little innovation in this area, perhaps, which I think
There's
many
also
of
work
us
to
would
do
like to
at the
say.
Maryland State Legislature level as well, so.
Yeah,
We were talking a little bit about the finances, which is the big elephant in the room. And you're talking about the idea of the president of the university being a fundraiser. Well, I think Mr. Wiest has been a very effective fundraiser. That has been his main mission, to double the size of the school system budget since he's been here, and he has done it successfully. And when there have been instances where there was a question as to whether or not he would get all the dollars that he wants, he brings in the buses and threatens cuts to people's favorite programs. I think our next superintendent is just going to have to be the kind of person who acknowledges the financial realities, knows how to do more with less, and doesn't see the sky as the limit, and isn't into, bankrupting.
That's
the
the county
citizens.
council's job, isn't it? Why is that the superintendent's job?
He puts together his budget.
I'll make it one sentence.
Well, okay, one
The
sentence, because there are
issue of
other people that
maintenance
haven't spoken.
of effort hangs over our school system, and it's the reason that the county council can't really bring it in. But you can talk about maintenance of effort, and that issue is again. So up there.
Right, who hasn't, was there somebody up who hadn't spoken before? Yeah.
I just don't understand. You say, well, gee, this issue of, well, it's a bureaucracy, you can't change the money. That's exactly the wrong answer, because that's how you hide things. I'm not in this area, but I've been a lot in financial work with companies, and if you can't figure it, if it's messy and complicated, you're doing it wrong. That we can, computers and everything else, we can design this, and we need a board that will have transparency, and where all of us can see exactly where the money is going. And it has nothing to do with the education side. It's, where is this money going? Are there unnecessary employees here or there, or where we need to be able to see where it's going if we're going to effectively do it. There's a lot of people who don't have kids who are financing this, and you say, well, it's just charter schools you can leave. That doesn't answer the levying of all these taxes to support it. That's a totally different question.